From Ouija boards to deals with the devil, we've got a spooky one today. Here is part 2 of the top 10 evil people who summoned real demons. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Theophilus of Adana. Okay, so to start off this list today, we are taking it a little bit back all the way to 538 AD. Theophilus of Adana was a cleric in the Roman Catholic Church. So basically, one day he was elected to become the new bishop, but he ended up denying the offer, as it is said that he wanted a more priestly sort of position instead of one with all of that power and responsibility. It is said that he wanted the position of archdeacon, which would have seen him controlling where the donation money went. So apparently, in passing on this bishop position, he thought that if he gave this bishop position to his rival, then his rival should at least be grateful enough to give him the position he wanted. But of course, that did not happen. The new bishop gave away the seat that Theo wanted and instead gave him the position of being a humble cleric. This made Theo super angry, and this is when he thought that maybe the church isn't as holy as he once thought they were. This is when he decided to summon the help of Satan. He ended up signing a contract with Satan in his own blood. He denounced Jesus and the Virgin Mary, and it is said that, with the help of Satan, he was once again voted into the bishop position, and this time he accepted. At this point in time, it is said that he felt so guilty he confessed to this deal with the devil, and the priest who he confessed to decided that they should burn the blood-signed contract. For a second, Theo looked up, but then suddenly he collapsed and died. Many people believe that it was because he had broken his contract with Satan. In our number 9 spot today, we have Woken Up. This story comes from someone named Justin, and one night Justin and some friends decided to try their hand at contacting the spirit world through a Ouija board. They began to ask questions, but instead of the planchette moving to certain letters, it began to move to all 4 corners of the board, making a sort of X before it just started to go in circles. Justin and his friends decided to call it a night with the board, but not too long after this day, Justin decided to try again with a different friend. The planchette began to move in strange patterns again, but this time Justin said it felt like some sort of hex. Later that night, as he was sleeping, he all of a sudden out of nowhere felt some sort of forceful hand grab his arm, which of course jolted him awake. Once awake, he couldn't see anyone or anything around him, and everyone in his house was peacefully asleep. In our number 8 spot today, we have Aleister Crowley. This man is quite well known for being the leader of an occult group, and this really does stem back even into his childhood. It is said that quite early on, Aleister started calling himself the Beast and the Antichrist, and he is even quoted as saying that God and Satan fought over his soul. In one of his books, he wrote, quote, "I was in the death struggle with self. God and Satan fought for my soul those 3 long hours. God conquered. Now I have only one doubt left. Which of the twain was God?" Many people believe that perhaps he made a deal with Satan, but it is possible that these are just rumblings based on Aleister's teachings and beliefs. In our number 7 spot today, we have The Basement. This story comes from someone named Vince, and it has to do with a time he played with a Ouija board. He didn't really expect much to happen and was just sort of going along with it, but during the time using the board, the lights began to flicker and the air around Vince and his friends got quite cold. This is when they knew that something more serious was going on. The demon began to communicate with them through the board, and it told them its name, which Vince says seemed like a sort of Russian name. When they asked how the dark spirit got there, they explained that they had been killed. Vince explains that he and his friends took a break from the board, but they didn't remember to close the circle before they left, which, if you're not familiar with Ouija boards, is a huge mistake. Once they all returned back to the basement where they left the board, they could feel the heavy energy in the room, and they came to find that everything was in complete disarray. Books were thrown about, things were sprawled on the floor, but the only thing that hadn't been touched was the board, which still sat perfectly still in the center of the room, just how they had left it. Victor ends his story by saying, quote, "Upon looking at a mirror that we had nearby, the eye of the Ouija board was moving sporadically in its reflection." In our number 6 spot today, we have The Text. Okay, so this story isn't like others on this list, and it's one of the strangest I've ever heard. So basically, this person who was, on a dating app receives a text message one day from one of the guys that they were talking to that says, quote, "I've been thinking about summoning Satan to impress you." Okay, personally I would run the other way, but turns out these are texts some people are just waiting around to receive. When they followed up the text, the person said again, quote, "No, I'm not kidding, unless I told you when I was drunk, I legitimately sold my soul to him in January 2013. Turns out this guy really meant it. Of course, this person needed to know more, and as it turns out, they got the full story. So basically, this guy explained the entire procedure of selling your soul. He said that it's simple, you just have to write a letter, sign it in your blood, perform a sort of ritual, and then some sort of physical mark will show up on your body, like a scratch, and according to this guy, your wishes just come true. Apparently after this guy had done all of that, he said that he laughed in a voice that wasn't his own, and since then, all of his desires have been coming true. This story is weird, but apparently it really is that easy. Definitely wouldn't recommend trying it though, just in case, you know? In our number 5 spot today we have The Entity. This story starts off hot when the storyteller explains that they have used a Ouija board, and since doing so, they clearly have opened their home up to some sort of evil entity who hasn't exactly been kind. They say, quote, "It started out with that feeling like you're being watched, and doors are closing, and you hear footsteps on the hardwood when you're home alone, and it progressed slowly into being kept awake by something shaking the bed or pulling off your covers, sometimes even whispering your name. The board would disappear for days on end, then show up in places you never would have put it. I became obsessed with it. Then it was a black mass in the corner of the room, or the silhouette of a man watching you from the doorway. After that, it escalated pretty quickly. I had my hair pulled, fingers pricked, scratched." They go on to explain that sometimes while they're trying to sleep, they find themselves unable to move and can feel the entity whispering in their ear in what they say is Latin. They explained that they have since had their house blessed and are hoping that this keeps the demon at bay. In our number 4 spot today we have Jack Parsons. Jack was a man who was born just a few years prior to the Wright brothers flying the first airplane, and being born at a time like that had him growing up dreaming of and reading sci-fi novels about rocket ships taking people to space. It is said that this love of rocket ships and these dreams of going to space are what led to him summoning the devil in order to make a deal. Jack wanted to sell his soul in exchange for a rocket ship. This deal didn't end up working, but Jack continued to study science as he grew older. Later in his life, he stumbled upon the teachings of Aleister Crowley that we talked about before, and this is when he tried his hand at summoning things again. This time, he tried to summon a goddess named Babylon that was said to possibly help men get to the moon one day. Technically, in some ways, it worked because Jack Parsons ended up helping create the jet fuel that is said to still be used today. Maybe it was the deal with the devil, maybe it was the goddess, or maybe it was just good old passion and drive that did it. I guess it all depends on what you believe. In our number 3 spot today we have The Mistake. This story starts off with the storyteller and their wife and this new home that they had moved into. They both noticed some weird things happening around the house, and this led to them getting a Ouija board in the hopes that maybe they could get some answers as to what may be happening here. What they didn't realize before using the board, which is pretty common, is that these boards open the door to communication for anyone. Anything lurking on the other end can answer the call, and sometimes it's not the spirit you're hoping for. While using the board, they ended up contacting some sort of entity that didn't give them very clear answers, and things were feeling kind of vague. Near the end of their Ouija experience, they had the planchette just suddenly fly off the board despite neither of them touching it. After this experience, however, things got so bad that the pair had to break their lease and move. They explained that there were radios and TVs turning on by themselves all the time, they would find taps running when no one had left them like that, they could hear disembodied voices around their home, objects were moving, and the storyteller's wife even said that she had found the storyteller possessed one night, but he has no memory of it. In our number 2 spot today we have The Artist. Back in 1677, an artist named Christoph Heismann was working on a castle in Austria. He was so talented at his job that he had been commissioned by the nobles to do this work. There were rumblings about how he may have sold his soul to the devil, but no one was sure of it until it is said that Christoph confessed. He said he had 9 years prior and that he regretted it very much now and actually wanted an exorcism. They demanded to know if he was a practicing witch, but in the end it was decided that he was not, and that instead the devil just had a very strong hold on him. The local priest began giving Christoph exorcisms, and during these sessions, Christoph explained that he had these intense visions where he was coming face to face with the devil, who was in the form of a dragon. The dragon was holding the contract that held Christoph's soul, and this is when he was able to rip it out of the dragon's talons. When he woke up, it seemed as though he was cured. After this, he began painting pictures of the devil, and he even painted a story with multiple panels channels that told the story of how he sold his soul and how they helped him get it back. In our number 1 spot today, we have This Is Not a Game. This story is said to have taken place over a decade ago, and it starts off when the storyteller's sister had some friends over and they were in the basement watching a scary movie when they decided to start playing around with the Ouija board. Things weren't going exactly as they anticipated, and they all started getting frustrated at the board and began to hurl some insults toward it, calling it fake and things like that. At this point, they turned their attention back to the movie and away from the board, but it soon became clear that someone was in fact listening. All of a sudden, the lights and all of the electricity goes out and it's just pitch black. The TV suddenly turns back on, but it's just blaring static. The TV shuts off again and turns back on, but it's just a black screen. Suddenly, words appear on the screen that reads, "This is not a game anymore." They all ran out of the house as quickly as they could, and that was definitely the last time any of them touched a Ouija board. It isn't exactly clear who or what they summoned, but whatever it was certainly was not playing around. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlovsky, and I'll see you next time. Bye!